Dear friends, Salam Alaikum, and shukran for this wonderful invitation opportunity. It's always been a privilege for me to visit Gaza. It's something I've never taken for granted. I've been here, I was talking with Dr. Ahmed, probably coming up maybe on 140, 150 times. And each visit is a special visit because I take away more than I can bring when I come to Gaza. But it is a special honour today to be invited by the Ministry of Women Affairs to share with you some thoughts, and in particular to share with you concern for women prisoners, women detainees. When we talk about the rightful empowerment of women, so that women can play a rightful part in the decision-making processes that shape not only our present lives, but our future, we cannot give attention or focus to those women who have been totally disempowered, those who have lost any say over their lives, who have lost their freedom, and who are totally vulnerable to the will of others, women prisoners. I belong to a spiritual tradition. My faith emphasizes the importance of embracing prisoners. It's not a choice, but actually, if you believe in the fundamentals that I believe in, embracing a prisoner, visiting the prisoner, is an opportunity for a real encounter with Allah. It's a spiritual encounter. It's a spiritual obligation. It's a spiritual moment in our lives. And the reason for that is that the vulnerability of the prisoner, the fact that it's someone who is deprived of what all of us take as a human necessity, to be able to make our own decisions, to be able to live with a freedom that enables us to grow and develop this cherished life that God has given us. So when I talk about prisoners, it's not so much a political action, it's not so much a social action, it's for me very much a spiritual action, and I would just like to focus on that. As I said, it's a great honour to be invited by the Ministry of Women's Affairs. Some years ago, I met an incredible lady in Tunisia. She was a member of the Ennahda party, and after the Arab Spring, when Ennahda was elected to power, Metasia, who sadly passed away a couple of years ago now with an unexpected illness, but Metasia was the Speaker of Parliament, the first freely elected Tunisian Parliament. And we would often talk about the challenges that she as a woman faced, the sort of attitudes that were preventing her from contributing in a rightful way to life of her society. And it was those talks that eventually gave rise to something we set up at Forward Thinking a couple of years back. And that is a network of women parliamentarians from the MENA Gulf region and Europe. It's just European parliamentarians and parliamentarians from Lebanon, Jordan, Iraq, Saudi Arabia, Egypt, every MENA country, Tunisia, Libya, part of it. Women who have taken part, an active part in politics with an awareness that they bring a unique contribution to the development of not just their own societies, but globally, to our human growth and development, that the intuitiveness, the insightfulness, the spirituality of women has something enormous to contribute. So I'd just like to share with you, we've met a few times, even post-pandemic, and met online. And inshallah, it is something that I hope that you will be able also to associate with, because in the sharing together, Europeans from all the Finland, Sweden, France, England, all of the countries, with women from Jordan and the countries I mentioned, they have found that they have so much in common, so much in common. And if I may very briefly, before we get into discussion how we can address things, I'd just like to share with you some of the findings that have come from the meetings. These are agreed. They're trans-boundary, trans-cultural, they're trans the different beliefs and faiths we have. But the important thing is the shared experiences of women from European, as I say, MENA Gulf countries. As I say, the purpose of the group, which now has, I think, about 40 women parliamentarians, was to ensure that women are present during decision-making processes and develop practices to support a new generation of women taking up meaningful leadership positions that hold both relevance and power, challenge the trend of placing women in cosmetic leadership and roles that hold little meaning or influence. We have a saying in Britain where when you formed a committee, you always had to have the statutory woman on the committee. In other words, any committee was expected to have one woman. She wasn't expected to make a great impact. She was just there, as this says, for cosmetic reasons. Well, great to know that in Gaza you have made an impact. I've heard the work that you as a ministry have been doing and the role that you're playing, and I think that is wonderful. It's very much in keeping with what this women's network of parliamentarians, but it's also, the network is to encourage to bring women to bring their own identity and skills to politics. Terribly important, their own identity and skills to politics and other leadership roles, rather than feeling pressure to emulate the behaviour of men. I wish I have had the good fortune of being present at all of these meetings when this decision making was made, and to listen to the experiences of women from all the different cultures, the experiences that they share in common, they have to fight that struggle that, oh, I have to be like a man to be heard. No, the purpose is that the world needs the insights and above all the voice of women if we are to become truly human. This is the way God made us, and to exclude an important experience and insight is, in fact, I would say, to run contrary to God's will and purpose for us as human beings. The aim also is to train and support women parliamentarians to ensure they are equipped to address the challenges they are likely to face. Sometimes we elect women or appoint them to positions and then don't give the support, don't give what is essential in enabling you to have an effective voice in the decision-making process. And then it's advanced protections for parliamentarians to address the ongoing risk of physical and online abuse. I don't know how you are able to keep in touch with events, particularly in the UK, but we have had one of the most prominent, most influential, most effective leaders just resign. and that was Nicola Sturgeon, who was the leader of the Parliament in Scotland and the government in Scotland. It has devolved government where it can make its own decisions. She was one of the most remarkable leaders of the last 20 years. Note, I'm saying leaders, because I put her above any Prime Minister we have had in Britain over the last 20 years. She was a remarkable person, but she resigned because of the impact the COVID pandemic had, the stress it had on her life, but also because of the abuse she got online and the sort of, you should not be doing this as a woman, you should not be so prominent, you should not have such a voice. So there is a very real lesson. This is in the heart of what we call the mother of democracy, the British Parliament, where we have an effective leader stigmatized and abused because she was a woman. Now, that's part of the Women's Network, is to help develop practices that can avoid situations like that. One of the tasks the women identified too was to focus on reforms to education systems to create lasting changes to our political culture to ensure that girls and boys are raised in a way that advances respect for all members of society. Teach young people at an early age to respect women's voices, not just those that follow the established male behaviours. Well, we all grew up to respect a woman's voice, a mother. But when we're exposed to society, the pressures of the way society has been formed frequently overshadow that. And we forget the importance of how in our nurturing, in our growing up, in our development, how important that woman's voice was. So this is a reminder of how we can educate children to carry that into adult life, and in particular, the respect and the willingness, if they're males, to listen. It's, I think, a very important thing. Then to encourage governments in the MENA regions to enshrine labour rights for all workers, labour rights for all workers. This includes the introduction of fully paid parental leave when a woman has a child, that she's not just, oh, you're out of an income that's essential to the family, but that is protected and that she has that parental leave, that becomes part of legislation. And particularly too, recognising the right of domestic help, domestic labourers. I, in London, when I was a priest in London, was privileged to give housing to an organisation that dealt with Filipino migrant workers. And these were mainly, I would say, 100% Filipino women who were brought to London under special visas to work with families. And frankly, it was modern day slavery. They had no rights, and so we had a centre that if they were fortunate enough to run away and to be able to get the refuge and the support, the legal support that they needed. But this has got to be not just small little pockets, it's got to be the norm. And for the whole of the region, it's got Europe and the MENA Gulf region. This is the aims and goals of what our women parliamentarians are trying to achieve. And then advocate for updated employment laws to reflect the new reality of flexible working. You know, the flexible working now is something that is, particularly because of the pandemic, you know, when we couldn't go into office spaces, couldn't go into workspaces, couldn't participate normally, people realised flexible working, why do we have to say you have to be working at 9 and leave at 5? If you have children growing up, why can't you work around your children? Why do you have to work according to the rules set by a company or whatever? So those are some of the issues that the women said are so easy. And it's all about not shying away from responsibility, but it's trying to ensure that the realities of women's lives in particular are taken into account in the workplace so that they can actually give of their best. So often people come stressed because they have competing obligations to family, obligations to society, and then trying to do the work well. If we leave it to the degree it is possible for the individual person, in particular the individual woman, mother, to decide this is the best way I can contribute, we get more out of people. This is not my saying. I'm reflecting the hours and hours and hours of discussion of these women parliamentarians. And I think once again, what I find really important, it transcends culture, it transcends our different faiths, it transcends our different languages, and it's a common experience. Now, I realize our time is limited, so I'm going to try and very quickly just pick out one or two other key things. The invest in education and childcare, including early years care, to provide the support that is needed, encourage recognition of childminding as a profession, and legislate for formal payment. So, sometimes it's getting that balance, that you get support. Now, in Gazan society, in some way, you're protected by extended family. But sometimes the extended family can't take on those obligations. So there needs to be an awareness, I think, in the political and social situation that legislation is put there. So it's not at the whim of an individual employer. I run a hotel, or I run a factory, or I run an office, or a school, or something. But in some way that there is an ability to negotiate your circumstances. Now, I don't think this will make for a chaotic society. I think it will make for a wholesome and better society where the individual is respected in their circumstances. So that is one of the things. They guarantee access to internet for all, treat Wi-Fi as a utility, such as water and electricity, that should reach all homes and communities. Forgive me, it's ironical saying electricity in Gaza when I know what hardships you've had to suffer over the past 15 years in the electricity supply, and even Wi-Fi, which we depend on it. But that is something that we should aim for and see, but as I say, that certainly is not, in the Gazan situation, it is more poignant. I'm just going to finish now with one or two important things again, which are transcultural, transfaith, advance arguments that present social care and public health policies as an investment in human capital rather than a cost. Underline the economic impact of domestic violence and for economic recovery post-pandemic. How we get over the COVID thing is still a struggle. But I think this, the great emphasis, again, right across culture, right across the different political systems, is the common experience of women, particularly in the pandemic, of the increase in domestic violence. And they were saying, how can we work together as women to address this issue and to just recognize that it has to be something that we should be addressing. And in particular, this was the Iraqi parliamentarians really put a lot of focus on this, because in Iraq, in Baghdad, in their parliament, they're trying to introduce laws that actually legislate against this and give protection, particularly to women in these situations. So I'm going to end there because I think the important thing is to hear your views. I must practice what I preach. I can't just come in and share one side and not get the feedback from you. Shukran. Thank you.